Hey guys, Ryan here at Plague Scythe Studios. Welcome back to Pedalhead. Today we are once again shooting out another fairly famous pair of drive pedals. I know more OD boost pedal stuff. We'll get to some other stuff later down the road, but I've been waiting to make this video for months now, and I've been waiting on a new guitar to get here, and it is here, so we'll be able to take advantage of that and get some pretty good tests going. So today we are talking about the Fortin Grind and Fortin 33 pedal. First off, apologies for the garbage audio here. My lav mic died about 30 seconds ago while making the intro to this video, so it bit the dust. Don't have a proper replacement, so hopefully that'll be here by next video. The parts of this video that actually matter, the guitar recordings, are fine though, so that's the main thing. I'll try to make do with this garbage camera audio. So basically this will follow a pretty similar format if you've seen the prior episodes on the Tube Screamer, the SD1, where we'll be putting these things head to head and kind of giving some some apples versus apples comparisons. Today I'm actually presenting three major pairs of guitar test recordings using both active pickups as well as passive pickups. That way you can hear exactly how they interact with these sort of pedals. And we'll be using riffs based on 6-string material as well as 7 and 8 strings. We'll be using 4 guitars in total. 1 6-string with active, 1 6-string with passive pickups, both of those being Gibson scales, using the same types of tunematic bridges, so it should sound, fairly equivalent besides the pickups and the body construction. And then we'll have 2 extended range guitars, both 8 strings, one with a 28.625 inch scale length and Tosin Abasi's signature Fishman Fluence pickups. We'll be sticking with the main Voice 1, which is kind of the modern active humbucker sound, and then another 28 inch scale 8 string with Lundgren M8. So should be able to get a pretty full palette to be able to compare these two pedals in use cases that actually make sense, that people are using for them. So I've debated for weeks how I'm going to structure this video, and there's no perfect way to do so, but I think I'm actually going to give away some of the best parts up front, partially because I know not everyone watches these to full length because they're long. Today we have over 10 minutes of test recordings alone, so this one's going to run long, so if you skip around, that's okay, don't blame you. But I still wanted to talk about some of the background of these pedals and get some of those findings out of the way, because I fear if I don't, a lot of you may hear things in the test recordings in the little shootout segments that aren't actually there, because human psychology is very folly to that. So let's start with just a little bit of background about the grind pedal and the Fortin 33. The first revision of the Fortin grind pedal showed up about the better part of half a decade ago at this point, and made quite a few waves around the metal guitar player community for being a legitimate competitor to a lot of the Tube Screamer type pedals that people use to tighten up the front end of high gain amplifiers. And this is basically the one trick that this pedal and the 33 do. What you're supposed to do with it is stick it in front of a high gain amp channel that on its own isn't articulate enough, maybe it's too flubby, or simply doesn't have as much gain, or at least it's too saturated if you do turn up the gain. And that allows you to turn an otherwise inarticulate amp channel on its own, like say the red channel on a dual rectifier, into something that's really usable for drop C tunings, for 7 and 8 string guitar tunings, without relying on stuff from like Tube Screamers and super overdrives where there's a little bit of natural compression built in. There's always just this hint of dirt with either symmetrical or asymmetrical clipping diodes, and a lot of that stuff either just doesn't play well, or people don't want to introduce that kind of thing into their signal chain. They just want more out of the amplifier. They want more from those really nice pickups they have. Now, it's not exactly the biggest secret how the grind pedal goes about delivering the guitar tone many of us really enjoy from it, although the exact profile of it has really been kept fairly secret for quite a long time. So I hope to shed a little bit of light on that. But everyone's known that it's kind of a modern take on a lot of what Tube Screamer type pedals do, a lot of what people have done in the studio for years at this point, and that is chop off a good percentage of the low end of the guitar. That way you're not driving an amplifier so hard with bass frequencies that make it flubby and don't take palm muting so well, and then you boost a lot of the mids and high mids and the treble frequencies to get the grind, the shing jing jing sound that everyone is looking for, or as Friedrich Thorndahl so adequately put it before, gent. So that's pretty much what it's doing. And even though a lot of us had no idea exactly what it looked like, it was fairly easy to replicate. You could take something like, say, in the Fractal Audio firmware, you could take a clean boost pedal model, you know, chop down the bass, crank up the treble, leave the tone controls around noon, and you get something that sounds nearly identical to this. That's pretty much what I did in my own tutorial. You can take, you know, like a parametric EQ, get close. You can take something like an esoteric boost, get something extremely close as well. But exactly what the circuit was, you know, most people just haven't really dug down too deeply, but it delivers something that I think a lot of people enjoy. Now, it should be noted, the grinds have gone through a few revisions. I own, I guess you could call it, one of the 3rd generation pearl white grind pedals. And aside from a change in the control knob, there's also a side jack here which allows you to turn this thing into a channel switcher, which is pretty cool, meaning that when it's on, you set this dip switch to the proper position, you're on high gain, you turn it, and then you're on your low gain clean channel, which is pretty cool. So everything I'm talking about in this video really applies to this particular grind pedal I have. I can't make sweeping statements about ones that come before it or after it because I simply don't have them. I'm willing to bet, though, that they're more or less the same, at least within margin of error, based on the part selection at the time that they were produced, because, you know, you're not going to take something that made, you know, kind of that good first impression the first time around and change it too much, I wouldn't imagine. So scholarly, I'm only speaking about the grind pedal I own, but given some of the findings in this video, I'm pretty confident that it also covers the rest of the grind family as well, whether you have the original, whether you have the blackout version, or a newer kind of standard bass grind pedal. And that brings us to what I believe is the star of today's show, the Fortin 33. This pedal is so interesting in so many ways that it wasn't even intended to be. I think you'll agree with me by the end of this video. So I actually fell in love with the sound of this pedal before I even knew it existed, or at least the signal chain as a whole where this pedal was used, because with the release of 2016's Violent Sleep of Reason, Meshuggah were actually using prototypes of these things, driving all sorts of amplifiers. They mixed like a half a dozen per song. So they had some like a hand-built Fortin Satan, they had some Fortin modded Marshalls, they had dual rectifiers, even had an orange and like a custom audio preamp thing they used on a couple intros. And I really dig the production of that album. So when I saw them on the tour supporting that album, they were also using prototypes of this thing before I knew what it was. And basically at the rig rundown at that time, it was like, yeah, this is a prototype Fortin pedal thing. It's a 22 decibel boost with a proprietary EQ curve, and we're driving these production Randall Satans, and their guitar tone was, you know, phenomenal, as it always is, but especially impressive the night I saw them. So naturally I kept my eyes on Fortin amps for what I hoped was the inevitable release of that product, and eventually it came. And that's what resulted in the Fortin 33. So this was a limited edition clean boost that is technically Friedrich Thorndahl's signature version. Got the green LED here, got the Catch 33 black on black paint scheme, thought it looked awesome, and being the Meshuggah fanboy I am, I had to have it. And also, it sounded great. I mean, I heard it in person, at least the prototypes, heard plenty of demos, it sounded good, so ordered it without thinking too much. And while the grind runs in like the $225, this ran pretty similarly at $233. Thank God they didn't make it $333, because I still probably would have bought it. And though I enjoy playing with this thing in front of basically all the guitar amps I own, you'll often find it sitting right there because I'm afraid of messing it up. You know, I'm afraid of chipping the paint. So when I do actually play it, it's sitting on top of an amp head, set very gently so I don't scuff it or anything. And partly because these things are really treated as a collector's item. They're almost the new Klon, which I really don't understand why, especially after the results of this video, where they're selling for like $500, you know, 100 to 200% markups. I've seen them actually selling for. To put it simply for now, don't buy them at that price, and that's like all they're selling for. So don't waste $500 on this sort of pedal. I think the evidence in this video will speak for itself as to why you shouldn't do that once we get through here. So the grand question with those pedals is, well, what's the difference? They're both one knob operation things. The marketing really only specifies the 33 as being a couple more decibels of boost versus the grind, but a lot of people were under the impression, had the understanding that because this is a Meshuggah signature, then it's going to be a different curve, right? They use some of the TC Electronic line driver clean boosts on some of their biggest breakout albums, so maybe they're taking elements from that design and kind of mixing it with some stuff that Fortin's figured out, and then they've got something new, standalone product that's worth having, both of them. So it was my goal to set out and see exactly what the differences are, because when I got the grind pedal set next to the Fortin 33, I thought I heard some differences. You know, like, oh, well, this one is a bit honkier, this one's got like a scoop going on in this region, I like this pedal for this guitar better, I like this pedal for that guitar better. So, to remove any more opportunity for subjectivity, I repeated the same sort of pink noise EQ match that I performed with the SD1 circuits, and this is actually an even better test with the 33 and grind pedal, since there is no clipping going on whatsoever. There's no gain control. It's literally just output. So what you see here is basically exactly what the pedal is doing. So I actually tone matched not just these two pedals, but I also threw in the Nameless, the Fortin Nameless digital version of the grind pedal that's included in that VST suite, just to see if there is any variation, how close they got to the physical grind pedal that I own, and if it was maybe modeled off of something older or tweaked to work better in the VST space. And this is basically what we got. I think the major takeaways from this graph are pretty much obvious the second you lay eyes upon it. So first things first, pretty much everyone was spot on with how this thing chops off low end. We've got about -15 to -13.5 decibels at 20 hertz, and then a crossover frequency right below 300. So you got a big chunk of that low end that's getting decimated to tighten up your guitar sound. From that point on, there's a pretty linear slope. I say linear in logarithmic space, so no, it's not linear, but you know what I mean. So that's a fairly constant slope up to the 900,000 hertz region. That's when we get between 9 and 10 decibels of boost, and kind of a gentle slope after that, and flattens out the physical pedals. What you'll notice, difference-wise, is that the Nameless is actually the biggest outlier between the three, although it does very closely follow both the 33 and grind curves. Now, one can only speculate why these differences exist in the digital model, though they're all probably of trivial matters. If you put the physical grind pedal next to this, you really can't tell a big difference, not enough that it really should matter to anyone unless you're just absolutely neurotic about your guitar tone. It all does the same sort of stuff. You might see this dip here after, about 16,000 hertz. Guitars don't really go up that high, at least the raw signal, so it doesn't even matter. And so I can only imagine one of two things. One, this is either based off of an older grind revision. Like I said earlier, that may be a possibility. Even then, it still follows the same general sort of path. And even if that's not the case, maybe this is the ideal grind curve. Maybe this is like the exact thing Mike had dialed in at some point in some virtual model or with a breadboard or something. And it's like, yeah, this is what I want to make, but with the cost constraints and everything we got going on with this pedal, this is as close as I can get it. And either way, they both sound fine, so no big deal there. I think the far more interesting conclusion here is that the two physical pedals we EQ matched are, for all intents and purposes, the exact fucking same thing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't exactly consider about half a decibel of difference on these peak frequencies all that crucial, especially not, closer to a decibel at 180 hertz. Otherwise, it's the exact same curve. And if you're that neurotic about your guitar tone, then you're probably also the guy that's trying out like a dozen different tube screamers to sort out which one sounds the best based off of component tolerances and all that. And if you're that way, more power to you. That's fine. Then you'll probably want to test out all sorts of other stuff as well in that same manner between amp heads and individual pickups, individual guitars. And if you have the time and patience to do that, cool. Nothing against it. The problem is, I don't think 99.9% of this audience is really that particular, because number one, we probably just aren't going to be able to hear it. Number two, those things with component tolerances, manufacturing errors, all that good stuff, it's probably going to blend in with that sort of noise that we're seeing here. So I cannot confidently state one way or another if that's pedal design or if that's component tolerance just by looking at it. So that prompted me to say, you know what, screw it, rip in peace to all my warranty, I'm taking these pedals apart, I gotta see for myself. So I did just that. And no, I'm not gonna make it super easy for all of you, would-be pedal copiers out there. I'm not showing you a trace, but I can say with 100% confidence, these are the same PCBs. They say literally on both Fortin Grind /33 revision, whatever number they're up to. And that's fine. I kind of expected that after seeing this curve. I went through basically every component and looked for differences. As far as I can tell, they're all the same values. Resistor values, capacitors, they may have looked physically different based on where they were sourced, what they were using to manufacture them at the time, but the values themselves were the same. The tolerances were pretty much dead on, and I think it really had to come down to cost and availability at the time. And all those little errors probably are what, brings that, and you're probably going to see that much variation. You're going to see way more variation than that in something like a super overdrive or something. So that is completely acceptable as far as I'm concerned. The one difference I could find between these two pedals, and I looked a long time, I documented as much as I could to make sure I didn't accidentally count something twice. I found one diode that was on this 33 pedal, and on that same spot on the grind pedal, there was nothing. It was just, soldered over, which tells me that's where that extra 2 decibels of boost is coming from. What I can also say after digging around in the guts of these pedals is that they're really well made. Like, once they're all assembled, I mean, nothing's going anywhere. They're really tight, and even just looking at the PCB alone, you can tell it just has this air quality about it. It's smartly laid out. It's just a good design overall. So I can give kudos to that, but what that doesn't change is that these two pedals effectively under the hood are what I would consider interchangeable. I mean, if you care about those minute differences I'm showing here and about any of the tone samples you're about to hear, then that's fine. You can make decisions on your own based off that, but pretty much factually they're more or less, I'd call it identical. Again, you could probably take a couple different production pedals and get differences that are akin to what you're seeing here, even though these are advertised as 2 separate models. So I'm going to save my personal feelings about that matter until the end of the video. We're here for science mainly. So let's get started with our 6-string tone test. For all these tests, once again, you're going to be hearing active and passive pickups. This first round uses 2 6-string guitars that are of Gibson scale length. We're going to be going through the Randall Thrasher. Every time, every test, we'll be changing up the cab impulse response just to get kind of a sound that I wanted for each test. And you'll be able to see the raw settings and then the settings the pedals are on. I'm going to be sticking to 3 settings with this, and that did make life a little bit easier considering with stuff like Tube Screamers, you've got 3 different controls. With this, we're going to be looking at 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then maxed out down here at like 5:30. That's more or less the sweet spots I find. No one really uses this thing below noon. At that point, it doesn't sound like a boost. It just sounds like an anemic tone suck device, which is not what you want. So we're just using it on settings I think are reasonable. And as you'll hear, for some of these samples, it's not enough gain on certain parts. On others, it's too much. And I think through all this, you'll be able to hear kind of the sweet spot for each configuration. Well, there's no doubt from those demos that these pedals are doing their advertised jobs. They're, boosting the critical high mid frequencies and taming the low end, producing something that's a lot more tight, although to my ears, for my preferences, it's a little honky for my tastes. And with an amp like the Thrasher, where you got independent low frequency, high frequency gain controls, I could have tamed it a little better probably, but at least for the like settings, to make them both sound okay, I wasn't terribly in love with either of the tones. It definitely worked, and I felt once it got a little more saturated, especially around 3 o'clock to maxed out, it worked better for both. I prefer the active just a little better, and it is good to hear that a pedal like this can take something with active pickups, especially something that a lot of people have the stigma about it being just no dynamics, squashed, compressed crap that a lot of people don't like, and it still sounds lively. And in your face, which is good, and still retains the life and a lot of the positive qualities people like passive pickups. So if you had any doubts that these don't work with active pickups, or they're only supposed to be paired with passives, then it works with both really well. So for me, I prefer the tube screamer type thing with 6 strings a lot of the time. Though if you're starting to get into really low tunings and you've got an extremely flubby amp, then it will probably work really well for you. I'm going through something that only needs a little bit of boost anyway, but if you're playing through like a JCM 800, 900, you'll probably be really happy with these for 6-string work. So with that, let's get into some lower tunings. We're going to be experimenting with mostly standard tuning in 7-string form, so that will be from B onward, and hear how that sounds with both Fishman Fluences and Lundgren M8s. the Fortin pedals really starts to shine for me, and it does sort of the same thing with the 6-string test, where it captures and retains all the positive qualities of both pickup technologies. If you like the sound of the actives, or in this case, Fishman Fluences, they're technically actives, they're battery powered. If you like that focused kind of super modern high output sound, you can still tell they're Fishman Fluences. If you prefer kind of the crunchier, lower output, more dynamic, more whatever sound of the Lundgrens, you can still tell they're Lundgrens, and that's what makes them really enjoyable pedals to play through, is because whatever your guitar sounds like, it still sounds like your guitar. It's just throwing some EQ on it and boosting the output. So I really like it for both. I like it more for actives than I thought I would. Now that I've had kind of an apples to apples comparison, I think it does a better job at 3 o'clock or below for the actives, and then you pick up the slack with the output and retaining the low noise floor and all that once you get past 3 o'clock with the passive pickup. So work wonders for both, I think, and happily use these pedals for either of those applications. Finally, let's get into some 8-string territory. I mean, you had to see this one coming. We're using a Friedrich Thorndahl signature clean boost, as well as the same pickups that Meshuggah have used for years at this point. So let's see how these pedals handle the old F standard tuning. 8-string guitar is where these pedals become an invaluable tone tool for me. Like I said earlier, throw me a Boss SD1 with most 6-string stuff and I'm more than happy. It does exactly what I want it to do, and it has that asymmetrical clipping thing that kind of works well with high gain amps, better for my style than tube screamers do. With 7 strings, a lot of the time, that works just as fine, depending on the tone going for, and if the amp is articulate enough, has enough gain, if there's enough tone control, like say with the Randall Satan, or some of the newer amps coming out, Ingle Savage, then a lot of the times you don't need a pedal at all for even downtuned 6 or 7-string stuff. May not be the most pushed high gain sound in the world, but it will definitely work. With 8 strings, you gotta have something for me. I cannot play an 8-string guitar without a boost for high gain applications. Even like mid gain stuff, it's too much flub. And the bass guitar is what is handling a lot of the flub frequencies that sound good on a bass, not so much on an 8-string. So that's where I love these sculpted EQ. It rolls off just enough of the bass, and in some cases too much for my taste, in some cases not enough. But it's a good balance between this glassy, articulate sound and still sounding like a full instrument. And hopefully to no one's surprise at this point, both pickup technologies still sounded like both pickups. There was a pretty clear difference between the Lundgrens and the Fishman Fluences, and it's all going to come down to personal preference, but whatever your preference is, it is saved within these pedals. It's not like a great equalizer, it just brings out more of the qualities that you may like or dislike. So that more or less does it for the objective shootout part of this video, but before I get into conclusions, I wanted to introduce one more aspect of this Fortin boost pedal conversation that may ultimately influence your decision to buy one or how you use it, because like I said, they're ultimately a fixed EQ boost. It's just you control the level. So theoretically, there's nothing stopping you from just making that boost in some other either pedal or digital space, and obviously I've been doing that for a while. The guys on the Fractal forum kind of did a similar sort of pink noise analysis that I did to get something similar to the grind, and they ultimately implemented that into the Axe 3 boost section. So that part of it's pretty well understood. So what you can do instead of these pedals is a graphic EQ. So I have here the Boss GE7 and the MXR M108, I think. This is, yeah, the older one. So basically these are discrete graphic EQ pedals. I've shown how to use this one specifically in a standalone video on all sorts of tricks you can do in front of an amp and in the effects loop. Everyone should have an EQ pedal, in my opinion, whether it be parametric or this one. I think the choice of parametric EQs aren't as much as I kind of wish they were. And ultimately I'll have some trouble recommending either of these for reasons you'll see in a moment. But theoretically, you should just be able to look at that curve and say, oh, well, at 100 hertz, we'll move that down here to match that graph, and 1.6K we'll move there. And because you have different frequencies to choose from between these two, and like the MXR 6-band and some 8-band EQs, they're going to sound just a little differently based on how the, kind of your output is interpolated. But for the most part, you'll be able to get something that's very similar. And what's better than just sounding similar to me is that you have a choice on these pedals. So like I said earlier, stuff like the grind pedal on 6 strings, it's just a little honky to me, at least on the pickups I have equipped on that scale length. So let's say, well, it takes too much away from 125 to 250 hertz. Let's bump that up a little bit. Or I don't want as much of the tube screamer honk on this pedal, so let's dial back the 800 hertz. But I want just a little bit more level so we can boost that. And that gives you something that ultimately is much more versatile than a fixed EQ pedal, because while this works really well in a lot of applications, there's going to be people out there that just don't like the sound of it, plain and simple. And there's going to be some people like me that for some of their guitars it just doesn't work as good. So I think it's a good thing to have an EQ pedal for that purpose. Now, some of you might have pulled up another tab on your computer and are looking through listings and thinking, oh, well, this is the magic bullet. This is my solution. These things are running like 80 bucks used. This one's running like $60 used. I'm going to pull the trigger right now. There's one drawback to these. That is, they are mass-produced pedals. They're trying to be made for the lowest cost possible, and with that, they're using components that, while they work, are not perfectly suitable for audio applications. What that means ultimately translates to noise, a bunch of unpleasant sounds. So with the gain and boost that I have dialed in here compared to the Fortin pedals, it's atrocious. It's really bad. Fortunately, MXR realized what people were doing with their pedals, like Kerry King, and eventually they released the M109S and M108S that are supposed to be their updated silent versions. You'll see them in like chrome with blue LEDs, and they're supposed to be much lower noise floor. If you have one of these already, you can actually send them off or even buy parts yourself to do it and modify them with higher quality components to where the noise floor is more comparable to something like this. A lot of people don't want to do that. I can understand that, so maybe it's worth your while to buy one of the newer pedals. But even then, you've got all the features of this one. You've got 2 outputs, super low noise floor, and it costs like 100, 120 bucks new, so you can find them used for a lot cheaper than that. So you're still looking at well under half the price of a new grind pedal. You sacrifice the effect switching thing or the channel switching thing, but it still might be a good proposition for some of you. So with that, let's take a couple listens of these things. First of all, I want you to hear the noise that are coming from this at these settings and why it's kind of atrocious. And then you'll hear what it sounds like in a couple of clips with these pedals, the way they're dialed in. And so keep in mind, this is basically the worst case scenario. There's higher quality graphic EQ and parametric EQ pedals out there, some of which are digitally programmable, which I think is super cool. So, if you are okay with the sound you're hearing here, maybe you can look at something more high quality, something with a little less noise floor, pay a couple more bucks and get what you're looking for. So with all that, I hope ultimately you have the tools and understanding the examples necessary to make a decision on this sort of stuff if you're interested in the whole clean boost in front of a high gain amplifier philosophy to get your guitar tone. There's really no bad way to go about it, any of this. It's ultimately what value it has for you. So with that said, I guess my personal conclusions, how do I say this? With Fortin pedals, I'm a fan of Fortin amps. I'm going to come out and say it. Some people have a stigma. Some people aren't fond of Mike Fortin's work. Some people accuse him of some stuff, which has no bearing on this conversation. But I think there's equally rabid fanboys as well as rabid, detractors as there is with anything. Me, I don't follow the Fortin Army Facebook group. I look, I watch his like NAMM show stuff. I like what he does. I like what Friedman amps do. I like what Mesa Boogie amps do. I have no stock. I have no stakes in the matter of his failure or success. I just like the products. That's where that relationship ends. That as a result, I keep coming back to it. I really had good experiences with Fortin amps in terms of customer service. Actually, 2 out of these 3 pedals have had problems, which, part of me wants to say that's not a good sign for someone. It's only a sample size of 1, and it's a small business, and I don't really care if there's problems as so much as how they handle it. And they handled it wonderfully. Had a bad IC in my last Zool. This shipped without the dip switch, and contacted them, and within a day they shipped me a replacement, or I shipped it back and they got it fixed. So huge round of applause for Mike and his team, the way they help customers. That means a lot more to me than the product does, so I can give high recommendations based on that. But as we've seen, the actual tricks, the actual guts of these pedals, what they do isn't all that complicated. And for me, it's never been about buying the product itself. I mean, partially it is, obviously, but you're never paying for just the thing. You're paying mostly for a service, even in the goods industry. If you buy an apple, you're not just paying for the apple. You can go out to a wild apple tree, if you're willing to look for one, and pick an apple, and now it's free. What you paid for was the shipping, the distribution, the FDA approval, the labor or someone, all that quality control. That's what you're paying for. And to me, that's what you're paying for with these pedals. You're paying for one man or a small team, R&D. You're paying for manufacturing that I think is pretty good quality, minus the QC issues that I've personally experienced. Good build quality, paying for a cool paint job that you may like, and ultimately you're paying for marketing. That's the way the world works. If you don't like that, then buy something else. To me, I have no moral problem with saying this is a signature limited edition thing, and it's out when it's out, and that's it. Doesn't really bother me all that much, even as someone who bought it. It does bother me a little bit that there was not nearly as much transparency as I think there could have been. If the marketing materials had said, this is Friedrich Thorndahl's modified grind pedal, I would have been happier. Then I'd have bought this and never bought this. So obviously some of it worked. This wasn't intentionally malicious. No, I wouldn't say so. However, it is a lack of information that definitely would have been, I think would have been nice to have, at least in my use case. And so it makes you wonder, is that new Whitechapel blade signature just a grind with, a potentiometer on a couple of the bass and treble frequencies instead of a fixed EQ? My bet would be it probably is. And if that's what you want, great. And it gives you more, versatility than these things offers. But I guess I should stop myself right there, because all these things I just mentioned were never discussed in any, promotional material, any demo, anything I've personally seen of these pedals. It's always plug it in, let's see what it sounds like, oh, it's good, go buy it. No discussion about, all these things I take problems with a lot of guitar demos and guitar reviews in general. To pick on someone for a minute, and I'm not picking on him personally, Ole England, huge respect for the guy. I love his music even more than I love his content. I wouldn't be doing what I am doing if it wasn't for him. He was a huge inspiration for pretty much everyone that does anything guitar YouTube related. And so, mad props to him, and he's a great guy. So if I didn't have respect for him, I wouldn't be critiquing him. But with the launch of this pedal, he was actually the first content creator I saw that made a video for it. And in it, he said this: the
33 pedal is definitely the holy grail and a new go-to pedal that every metal guitar player needs.
Seriously, Ola? Really? Everyone needs to go out and spend $233 on a fixed EQ boost? I don't even think Mike Fortin would say everyone needs to go out and buy this pedal. They made less than 100 of them. As I've shown, you can get very similar results for a lot less money. And I get it. He's a Fortin sponsored artist. Obviously, he's making an advertisement, not a objective, impartial demo or review. But that still highlights the danger of these YouTube content creators, and I group myself in that, of influencers, because at that point it's so disingenuous, and it's one of my biggest problems with guitar reviews in general, as I've stood on my soapbox plenty of times about that. But it's stuff like that, especially after seeing that these are identical pedals, it just makes me sick, man. I'm so tired of seeing the endless meat grinder of guitar products, and then no one talks about it ever again. So to 99.999% of you out there, can I recommend either of these Fortin pedals? For the 33, it's pretty much hard no today. With them selling like to $500 to $700, it's just asinine. I can almost be frustrated with the sellers, but at the same time I can't be, because obviously people are buying them. So more power to you, I guess. What do they say about fools and money and all that good stuff? So yeah, I mean, if you're the most rabid Meshuggah fanboy out there, I guess maybe it could be worth something for collectors, but I just don't think this thing has like the staying power of an original Tube Screamer or a Klon pedal or anything like that if you're looking to make money one day. So to me, if you missed it, get a paint job on your grind pedal. That would be my recommendation. For the bog standard grind pedal, a $225 fixed EQ boost that you might as well round up to $240, $250 because shipping costs a pretty penny from Canada land. Can I recommend this? Like I said, the vast majority of people, not really. If you're the kind of person that just loves the sound of this, if this is exactly what you need, it works, you like the one pedal or the one knob operation because you're using it either on the road or you're using it in the studio and you want that consistent same sound without ever having to worry about, flipping a slider the wrong way or something like that, then it can pay itself back in time saved and convenience if that's what you're into. But for a majority of people that are pinching pennies, that are trying to really maximize the value of their guitar rig, then this makes absolutely no sense. To reiterate my point earlier, when you buy this pedal, you're not necessarily paying for what it does in the end. You're paying for marketing, aesthetics, low noise floor, this sort of cool operation that may be useful to you, maybe not. For me, I use all kinds of effects, reverb, chorus, delays on clean channels, so it doesn't do me much good outside of just practicing to, flip it on and off, cool occlusion, but it needs to be MIDI capable if it were going to be useful to me. So huge props to Mike Fortin and whatever of his team members actually figured out the grind curve, because it's great. I mean, it's a wonderful starting point for any metal guitarist, I think. The problem is it's not a one-stop shop for everyone. And for me, I need a little bit more tweakability depending on the guitar, though this works really well for a lot of things. So personally, I really have no hang up with paying the Fortin tax. If it's a pedal that I think it's going to serve a function for me, then I'll fork it over. Pretty simple. And there's all sorts of intangible things about this that, again, don't translate in a YouTube shootout very well. So it works for me. But again, I don't think anyone should be surprised that for a vast majority of players, I would say you don't need it, and in fact it's a waste of money for most of you, and it's not going to hurt the Fortin market at all by me saying that. If they're going to buy it, they're going to buy it anyway. So I guess I'll leave off this discussion with this, just a food for thought. You got stuff like the Tube Screamer, stuff like a modded JCM 800 or Super Plexi hot rod platform that's been done by so many companies. Both those circuits are just modded to hell. I mean, entire amp companies exist off of just those individual circuits alone, thanks to the way our copyright and trademark system works. You can't really just copy or trademark a circuit alone. You can trademark the drawings, you can do all this sort of stuff, but ultimately there's no legal protection over a Marshall tone stack. Anyone can make it. So my question is this: if people with relatively no electrical background, especially no electrical engineering background, can disassemble a pedal like this or a Tube Screamer in their basement and figure out how it works, figure out how to make one themselves that sounds good at a lower cost with reasonable quality, and sell it for half of what this costs, or add on to it and expand it, then do they not deserve to do so? I think they do, and I think that there's an opportunity in the market to support it, and I would say there is with this sort of thing. Then let it happen. That's the way I feel about it, and I seriously doubt that those alternatives would ever eat into their revenue. So that's pretty much my thoughts on the Fortin Grind 33. Really great sounding pedals. They're more expensive than what people probably want to spend for this sort of application, and at the end of the day, they're pretty much the same damn thing, which is pretty interesting. I'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you soon on an upcoming episode of Pedalhead with some different stuff, a little different flavors than Overdrive. So thanks for watching. Any questions, comments, as always, leave them down below. We'll see you next time. Bye.